All right. Well, there you go. A little intro. What's going on, everybody? Well, welcome to a special exclusive Renegade Radio exclusive interview. End of the year interview, if there ever would be one. I thought I was done doing interviews for a little while after I did the last one with Mark Marshall here a couple weeks ago. But lo and behold, after I announced the interview coming up with for season 4 of Renegade Radio coming up here soon, doing an interview with Dennis McNulty. Lo and behold, my friend Gary here decided that he also had a story to tell, and he definitely does. As far as the relation with Dale Shannon, as we celebrate his 90th birthday today, as of Monday, December 30th, 2024. I can't believe 90 years old already. It was only 3 months ago when I turned 41. So I got ways to go until I get that far. But anyway, we are here with my friend Gary Gerner, and he's part of the Writers Guild, and he's done some things in his life, that are pretty pretty interesting, I would say, and we're going to talk about it. And welcome to this Renegade Radio exclusive, there, Gary.
Thank you very much, Frankie. Appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you getting a hold of me because normally everything that like if I get a request like that, it normally goes right to my spam, and I don't. It takes me a while to respond back, but I seen it, and so I just thought, well, hey, it's not too often that people come to me and want to do something with me. Where normally I'm the one asking and begging, and for an interview or whatever. So you made it easy on me, Gary.
No begging is required.
So as we celebrate Del Shannon's or Charles Wheaton Westover's big day, that would have been his 90th birthday today. I mean, the memories, like I can only imagine that you have of Del, or just him in general, just because of who he was and everything. I have my memories, but I never met the guy. I never knew him in person because by the time I was a little kid when he committed suicide and everything. So it's kind of what's kind of your relationship with him?
Well, just like lots of people who grew up in the 50s and 60s, of course, hearing his stuff on AM radio back east. I grew up in the New York area, and two favorite radio stations back then, the two big stations playing rock music or pop music, were WABC AM and WMCA AM, and they both had a core group of DJs on WABC. I think their evening jock, if I remember correctly, was Cousin Brucey, Bruce Morrow, and WMCA had a similarly popular DJ.
Sure, sure. Well, that's awesome
So
to know.
it's his that initial string of hits is pretty amazing when you put them all together, and it's not just Runaway, it's the other stuff too,
Oh
especially
yeah,
for me, Searchin', and I'm of course blanking on the title of the other one around the same time, but
yeah.
just great material, and to be able to write a tight song like that and sort of fit the 2.5 minute mark for AM radio of that era. Amazing stuff.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I feel the same way because it's like his stuff. I kind of compare him and Greg Kinn a lot because you know they kind of are known for a lot of the same things where it's like they created lots of music, but nobody ever really, unless you really dug into the albums or whatnot, you didn't know anything else that they did. And both popular overseas as well, and both kind of lived their own lives the way that they did. But with Dell, like he like I feel like like he was treated pretty good in America, but he should have been given the royal treatment. Like you don't hear his name a lot, when it comes to like just a lot of things nowadays, and
Well,
that's kind of sad.
it's funny that you say that because I was actually, before I started writing this, I was talking to a friend, and he knew a lot more about what happened to Dell after that initial string of hits. So
Okay.
as I began researching it, I discovered all that stuff. I mean, the fact that he continued to be extremely popular in the UK, even though his popularity here might appear to have waned. And so I just discovered a lot of great stuff and did some terrific interviews with those people who were close to him. That includes, of course, his wife Shirley, his son Craig. They were kind enough to speak with me. James Popenhagen, Steve Monahan, his late friend, uh, Dan Burgoyce, former manager. So it was just very generous of them to take the time to speak with me. And of course, I also have to thank Dell's estate attorney, Neville Johnson, who gave me the go ahead to pursue the project.
Okay. Wow. It sounds like you know more people than I do, which is
Well,
not
you
surprising,
know,
I guess.
you can't start a true story without talking to as many people who may have known the subject of your story. That just then you're truly making stuff up. I mean, granted, every biopic of somebody, whether it's from rock and roll or elsewhere, it has to it has to ring true ultimately. You weren't there for to hear conversations between Dell and I wasn't either, of course, between Dell and his family or Dell and anybody else. However, getting to talk to the people who were there, who did talk to him, who shared those stories, um, that's what was key. And I never would have tackled the project if those people hadn't been kind enough to tell me their stories.
Sure, sure. So let's learn. Before we really get on the Dell train here tonight, let's learn as much as we can about you because you seem like you also live kind of an interesting life. As far as the things that you've done in your life, and you're kind of one of those guys that I would say or would really consider like an unknown, even though you're known, but you're kind of an unknown gem, kind of of the pop culture world.
Well, just I had a great connection when I moved to Los Angeles, thanks to somebody I went to school with back east, and that led to uh, my first real show business job. Simply was working as a page at a studio, the old Metro Media studio here in Hollywood,
Sure.
and that then led to contacts within Norman Lear's company because almost all of his shows were being produced at that facility. He had moved the shows that everybody remembers, All in the Family and Maude, moved over to that facility along with the Jeffersons, One Day at a Time,
Oh
American,
yeah.
and many other shows.
Sure. And,
Productions
and
of several of those shows.
yeah. And all those shows. I mean, I grew up on a lot of that stuff, even though I was born in 1983. But
Yep,
I own like on DVD. I own like the All the Family and Jeffersons, and I
yep.
think What's Happening. I think on
No, What's
DVD.
Happening was not one of his.
Oh, it was not. Oh,
No.
okay. Well, I'm just telling you, like, just like for like like I'll show you here.
Yeah. I understand. No, and those
Yeah,
shows, there's a reason that those shows are still in very, very heavy rerun mode. You can turn on one of the over the air channels here, and they run All in the Family kind of back to back with Maude and the Jeffersons and many of his other shows.
yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, that's what I like about it because they talk about how like all the family and all that Jefferson was just so racist, or they just like they wouldn't be able to make stuff like that today. I think they're just too scared to. More or less. I mean, because it's like everyone's worried about being canceled. Well, back in the day,
Well,
Norman Lear wasn't worried about being canceled because everybody loved what he was doing.
Yeah, he was able to, because of his success, he was able to stand up to CBS at certain moments. Anybody who's interested, I would highly recommend reading his autobiography.
Yeah, yes. And I mean, I just imagine that when you went to work and got to work with him and work with everybody else, that those days were just magical. I'm sure.
Yes,
It was
that's a great description. I mean, a few weeks prior to getting the job as a page, I was just struggling like everybody else, and
sure.
I got the page job. It was a severely limited job in terms of the hours you could work. You could only work, excuse me, 20 hours a week, and the pay back in the mid 70s was a whopping $2.50 an hour. So you were
Really?
limited, you were limited to that. And then
Okay.
fortunately I made some connections there, and the job working as a gopher and then production staff and then writer for Norman's company came along.
Okay. That's that's kind of crazy to even know that because I would have figured that you would have been like on a contract or whatever, like right away. Like,
No,
hey,
no,
you're
no,
working
nothing
for
like
TV, so
very few things like that happen in real life.
so as a page, then what are some of your responsibilities then? Like,
Oh,
what
that
would you have
was
to do?
Yeah, that was somewhat insane because a lot of people never read what's written on the backs of the tickets,
Okay,
the audience tickets, which basically says it's first come, first serve, and you may not get in to the taping of your choice. So there would be hundreds of people lined up for any one of those shows you mentioned, and then if they didn't get in, they might get a little testy, to be polite.
okay,
So you'd have to tell them, hey, we'll give you tickets for another taping and hope you can come back next week or in a couple of weeks.
okay, okay. So would you consider a page job almost like a what they call an intern, kind of like, or was
No,
that totally different?
a page job is more like being, although they don't have them anymore, more like being an usher, an old time usher at a movie theater.
Okay,
You help keep the audience happy while they're waiting in line. You talk to them, they ask you lots of questions about the
okay,
show, and so yeah, it's more similar to being a movie theater usher. But
okay,
it's also a place. It's also a great starting place.
yeah.
CBS still has ushers. NBC still has ushers. I'm not sure about ABC. I should say pages. I'm sorry, pages. Lots of people started out as pages, be they behind the camera or in front, and yeah, so that's the best description of a page job.
Okay. Yeah, I've always kind of wondered that because there's some people that I've interviewed before that were talking about being a page here and a page there. I'm just like, well, what
Yep.
the hell is that? You know,
Yeah,
So
you got to wear a very uncomfortable light blue polyester sports jacket that you had to wear at every taping. And there were, besides Norman shows, there were many other shows that were produced at that facility. So you got to see lots of people who you could never have imagined seeing in person.
okay, well, that's interesting. Oh, well, I mean, it's like just like you just don't know what day to day who's gonna
Yep,
walk through that door or
yep,
that gate or whatever. Okay,
yep.
okay, that's interesting. Did you have any encounters with anybody that was like
Yeah, I
fairly
mean,
well
I know
known?
we want to talk about Dell, so I'll keep these kind of stories to a minimum.
Sure.
Um, Before I got the job, well, it was when I had the job as a page, but it was more working for Metro Media than it was working on the Norman shows. Um, I'd be stationed in the lobby of the Metro Media facility, and the security guard there would tell me, "Oh, you need to go meet so and so outside," and then escort them into the building. and show them to a certain place. So I suppose the strangest person who falls into that category was, I was told that for some reason Hugh Hefner, the head of Playboy, was coming to Metro Media not for any video, but for some conference he was having with a group of people. And so I was told, so meet him at the loading dock, take him to the elevator, go upstairs with them, and show them where this conference room is. Now, one of the only things I knew about Hugh Hefner before that moment, aside from the fact that he started and was the head of Playboy, was that he loved Pepsi Cola. And so I go out to meet what turns out to be his limo, and he and several people get out of the limo, and I introduce myself and say, I'll escort you upstairs. And sure enough, one guy gets out of the limo behind Hefner, and he's carrying a 6-pack of Pepsi.
Jeez. Okay.
I tried not to laugh or let on.
You were expecting him to have something else, or like some alcohol?
No. I just thought it was an unusually bizarre experience. It's still a bizarre experience.
Hey, it kind of reminds us, think about Dell. I don't know if Dell liked Pepsi or not, but I do remember hearing his Pepsi ads.
Oh yeah, he did. He did that great commercial, which was in the vein of, was it Hats Off to Larry? I think.
It was like,
yeah, and that's it. That's actually in the script.
Okay. Well, that's interesting. It's interesting. Today's a special day for those that don't know. It's the birthday, or what would have been Dell's 90th birthday, and I think about a lot of times, because I grew up liking, like, I didn't learn about Dell until later in life. When I was like a teenager and stuff, because I grew up liking Buddy Holly. Buddy Holly was one of those guys that I was introduced to because my dad got me into music and stuff. And we'd always watch the Buddy Holly story and La Bamba and all that stuff and blah, blah, blah. And, we always listened to radio, oldies radio. And I always wondered about Del Shannon, because we'd hear about Runaway and all that stuff. But I knew this guy had more of a story, but I just didn't know what, because this was like the mid 90s. And I was just kind of growing up, as a kid. But I had a friend who loved music as well, and loved oldies and whatnot. And we kind of gravitated together, and kind of put our love for Dell together. And we never did anything exciting, but we loved listening to his music. Every time we'd find a song that we'd never heard of before, it was just a magical time. That's for sure.
Yep. Yeah, so, I mean, like I said earlier, I certainly knew a lot about the initial string of hits he had. Didn't know that much about what happened later. It was my friend who turned me on to what turned out to be his final 2 albums, Drop Down and Get Me, and Rock On. And both of them involved Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, as some of your listeners may know.
Oh yeah.
I really think, and Jeff Lynne co-produced the Rock On album along with Del and Tom and Mike Campbell. Actually, I think Tom was not involved as a producer on the final album, but he was certainly involved with the Heartbreakers on Drop Down and Get Me. So hearing those songs really for the first time as I dove into the research, was somewhat of an eye-opener, because he'd written these great songs, especially on Rock On, which almost never get airplay, even on like public radio rock stations. But they're really powerful songs. There's a lot of great music on the Rock On album, and I recommend it to any of your viewers, listeners, because it's really worth hearing. To my mind, it's a tiny bit overproduced, but That's kind of Jeff Lynne's influence, I believe.
It's
And
probably it's probably why it sounds the way it does because it kind
yeah,
of has
yeah,
that I know he was going to be originally part of the Traveling Wilburys, but they kind of had that Traveling Wilburys sound quality kind of like to it.
yeah. That's how. I don't know if you had a chance to look at those, to look at those pages,
Oh, I
but
did, but it's a lot
yeah.
to
Okay,
read, so
so
I could read it
so
all.
as you saw, although you couldn't read past those initial few pages, so the screenplay is bracketed by meeting the Wilburys at a Hawaiian estate where they actually were rehearsing. And then it's bracketed at the end by that phone call, which is somewhat mythological, from Tom Petty to Dell, inviting him to be a member of the Traveling Wilburys after Roy Orbison's passing.
Sure.
So I just thought that was granted, it may not be the truest of true elements, but it was a good dramatic choice.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I always kind of wonder what his life would have been like if he would have just went that route, and then not only that, but then you know lived.
Yeah, I
Suicide and all
think
that stuff. But go
I
ahead.
think he would have, you know, I think that would have been obviously an incredible boost to his career and for him personally. Also, it would have reignited interest in his other records, his other solo records, and also introduced him to a whole new audience
Yeah,
because it would be hard to beat a band comprised of those musicians.
yeah. That was almost like a freaking all-star band, pretty
Yeah,
much. If you think
exactly,
about
exactly. And to me, what
it.
really one of the things that shows Dell's power still to this day is the fact that his music continues to be used in current television series. For example, Runaway was used in what was the final season of Dexter a couple of years ago,
Okay.
because because it fit the overarching arc of that series at the time, and it was also used in an HBO series that began with the Vietnam War. And so one of the characters is talking about Del Shannon and specifically about Runaway. And
Okay.
one of the cool things about that song is I use it in my pitch. I ask three questions when I pitch the story to prospective producers. I say, whose first single is on Rolling Stone's list of the top 500 records of all time? Now, granted, that's a rather broad, almost absurd question to ask somebody because no one's going to guess it from that. Then I narrow it down with my second question, which is who not only influenced the Beatles, but was the first American artist to cover one of their tracks. And that's obviously also Dell. Some
Right.
people, that gives people a time frame. So they often guess, but often guess wrong. And then the final question, which really narrows it down for a lot of people, but only a few people have guessed it, is who was going to take Roy Orbison's place in the Traveling Wilburys after he passed away. And
Wow.
some people know that story, but most people don't know the answers to the other two questions.
Sure. 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 Yeah. That makes a great trivia for a lot of people because especially to young people. I really
Oh
feel
yeah,
like there's got to be a lot of young people that got to wonder about the history of music and wonder where it all happened and wonder
well,
about Dell and his contributions and
yeah.
stuff.
You mentioned something really important earlier that your dad turned you on to a lot of music, and
Yes,
and
yes.
that's been true with a lot of my friends because they didn't want their they didn't want their kids just listening to the so-called pop radio that
Uh-huh.
those particular kids grew up with, and they wanted them to know about the legendary artists. I'm not a big fan of the term classic rock. I think it does a disservice to many, many artists.
Sure.
So I'll just say legendary bands or legendary artists
Well, that
because
works.
they're all worth listening to, and I really hope that a lot of people explore that if they haven't already.
Oh, absolutely, and I couldn't agree more because I come here as a fan of Dell, no matter
Yep,
what.
yep,
I've always loved
absolutely.
Dell. I've always appreciated his music. He's one of those guys that I wish I could have interviewed, back in the day, or even while I'm doing it now.
Yeah,
I figure he would have a lot to say because well, from what James was telling me, and even Craig, his son, that he was just a hell of a guy. He was
yep,
just like he wasn't, an asshole or whatever. I mean,
no,
yeah, but you have to be sometimes when people, keep bugging you or whatever. But like he was one of the people. He was one of us. He was famous,
yeah.
but he was like, he had his issues and stuff, and that's what I don't understand. That I wish he could have got some help or something because he didn't have
Well,
to do what he did.
at the time, um, he was prescribed Prozac, which was
Okay.
a new drug at the time. And even though I don't know all the details about this, I may be misspeaking, but I think that the drug company um, might have had some internal studies revealing that for some people this was not a good idea to take Prozac, even though it was meant to help those very people. And so with Dell, unfortunately, it exacerbated his, nowadays we would call it bipolar. Back then, I think it was more known as manic depressive. And um, so it is unfortunate that it pushed him over the edge because I think and truly believe he still had a lot of great music to make.
Oh yeah. What one of the biggest cool things about when the internet came out, and it didn't happen right away, but it took a little while. Uh, Eventually, we would start hearing songs that never heard of before. That's what I was saying with my friend. And I every time, even now, like sometimes he'll find me a lost tune that he's never heard of before. It was all done by Dell, and I'd find him too, and we share, with each other. And like, oh, this is pretty cool. You
Yeah.
know, just when you think you've heard of everything, here's another stuff. Some more stuff that has come up from the archive. That's just
Yeah, there's a,
brilliant.
as you know, I'm sure there's a recent box set which just came out, which
Yes.
has every single thing he recorded. So I suppose that's for the ultimate Del Shannon fan.
Now,
Um,
wasn't that the Bear Family record box set too, or is this more like an
I believe
expansion?
so. Yeah, I
Okay, because I
believe
know they
so.
did one too like that, that
Yeah.
had most of the
So
stuff.
no, there's only one comprehensive box set. There were a million early on unauthorized Del Shannon greatest hits albums all
Uh-huh.
around the world, and that's one of the things that his uh, former manager Dan Burgoyce told me that he was able to kind of get all that stuff together and make sure that Dell was receiving the proper royalties for all of those unauthorized recordings.
Okay,
And it made a huge difference, not just in Dell's life, but in uh, uh, his co-writer Maren McKenzie, who co-wrote a few of the hits with him.
so
So that was
you're talking like a lot of his bootleg and stuff that they've been releasing.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
sure.
And I think there's still some of that out there, but I mean, there's bootleg stuff out for every artist. I mean, especially when you go on YouTube, there's all kinds of weird stuff
Oh
out
yeah,
there.
oh yeah. It gets weirder and weirder, but that's what I love about having Spotify. Now I'm not for I'm not for them not paying the artists or whatever because they should,
Right.
but there's nothing I can do about that. I'm just a fan of music, so I appreciate the platform. So once in a while, I'll dig through the archives and then listen to some Dell music or whatever because they got everything out of there too,
Yeah.
and all his later stuff. And like I used to be more of a fan of his early days stuff, but to me, it's more the later days. The Drop Down and Get Me album. That's just like almost a perfect album. It seems
Uh-huh.
like I like his outfit. The cover is pretty cool, and because here's the thing. I mean, you think you're telling a story just with the music that you're making, but you're also telling the story with the album, the way the album cover. You have to come
Oh,
up with the
sure.
idea, and how's it going to look and everything. And I realized back in the days they were more focused on doing stuff for vinyl than they were for anything else or cassette tape or whatever. They weren't really concerned about discs, compact discs, because I think this was before the disc came out. So
Yeah.
what, 1980, about maybe or
That
so.
sounds about right.
Yeah, he had a nice outfit on, like a sweatshirt.
Uh-huh.
You would never figured, it was like this Del Shannon. It's like, oh, what, it looks kind of weird, like he's running away from something or whatever. But I liked it. I think the cover tells the story if it's going to be a good album, and regardless of what you listen to.
Yeah,
As far as I'm
record
concerned.
album. I should clarify it. Vinyl record album covers used to be something that you, while you were listening to the record, you would hold in your hand. You would read everything that was ever written on the back of the album cover, especially if it was one of the double albums or just an album cover that opened up. I mean, I can still remember truly arcane information from record albums. I mean, why do I still remember that the instrumental band, the Ventures, used Mosrite pickups on their guitars? I have no idea. Because it was on the back of one of their albums.
Okay, I mean that makes sense. I mean,
Yeah.
like the one thing I always liked about Dell too is like when people would introduce him on shows and stuff. I've listened to a lot of his interviews and stuff, and the guy could talk. The guy could tell a story, even with his
Oh,
voice and
definitely.
everything. I mean, it's just
His
unbelievable.
his NBC interview with Bob Costas
Uh
is
huh.
really terrific for anybody who hasn't seen that. Likewise, I think it was the last print interview he gave, coincidentally, to somebody from my hometown, although I did not know her at the time, but I've kind of become friends with her since. Eden Goldstein. I believe she did one of the last print interviews with him. I
Okay.
may be, I'm sorry?
No, no. Go ahead. Go
Oh,
ahead. I just
okay.
said okay.
So yeah, he was extremely talkative. If your viewers have never seen his performance on Letterman with Paul Schaefer and his band, that's like pretty electrifying, actually. No pun
Yeah.
intended. And of course, also on YouTube somewhere, not hard to find, is I think the entire concert he gave in Australia, which I
Yes.
think was in the last year of his life,
I think
and
so.
that's a
Yeah.
great show.
He was wearing
Um,
a nice jacket. I loved his jacket that he was wearing.
yeah, and so you really get a sense of why he was so popular even after the so-called hits weren't being played anymore. Uh, he gave a performance, and he talked to the audience, and he was glad they were there, and that everything adds up to what an artist is, and he certainly had it.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And that's the thing about the power of music. It's just it's exciting when of a person that is talented enough to perform it. But it's just people talk about the struggles of stardom, and we all know Dell was struggling. I
Yeah.
mean, he after Runaway kind of faded, and I don't know, maybe he was trying to do something different with his career. He kind of took a different role, like in the what was it, like the late '60s or whatever, during the hippie era. He was doing like I one of my favorite songs that he did was off the Further Adventures of Charles
Uh-huh.
Westover, the song Gemini. To me, that's just like, I mean, that's like hippie, totally hippie. I
Yeah,
don't know
there
if you have to be
was
high to listen to it or whatever, but it's a trippy song. And then
Yeah,
you would not figure he would be doing
at the
that.
time, his record company decided, and I just reread the script this morning so I could talk about it reasonably intelligently.
Sure.
The record company, as Dan told me the story, they all gave up their ties and suits and started wearing Nehru jackets, et cetera. And they, in the wake of Sergeant Pepper's, they wanted something more, quote, psychedelic. So that's when I believe that record was produced in that era. So yeah, again, there's a lot of great stuff of his that has never probably been played on most, if any, radio stations.
So
And
let's talk about that a little bit
yeah,
because I always like to bring it up to certain people that I know can give me a good answer or a good response because to me it's totally bullshit that we have to listen to the same songs over and over and over again. Would you agree? I mean, as
that
far
well,
as top
that's
40 goes.
yeah, well, if you're talking about that kind of FM radio or AM radio, but I think it's mostly FM, that's sort of just the way corporate radio is. In a way, the most interesting radio, if you're talking about traditional radio, is really on public radio. Out here, we're lucky to
Okay.
have two great stations in the LA area that are both at different colleges. One of them is KCRW, based here in Santa Monica, affiliated with Santa Monica College, 89.9. And then you've got 88.5, which is KCSN, which is affiliated with Cal State Northridge out in the north end of the San Fernando Valley. And they're the stations where you're going to hear a lot of contemporary stuff that you've never heard of before.
Okay.
So you get to exposed to new music. You get exposed to legendary music, and you get exposed to some rather offbeat stuff as well. So
So some deep tracks or
support
whatever.
support your
Okay.
public radio stations,
Oh
and
yeah.
I don't work for either of them, but I just think it's a good idea.
But my question mostly is just on a personal level for you as a music listener. I mean, unless you like listening to top 40 all the time and you don't mind hearing the same stuff over and over again, but
No,
I can imagine that you too obviously would like to listen to something different, even in the genre that you like, even the era
oh
that you
yeah,
like.
I mean, I don't. I'll be the first one to admit it. I don't listen to top 40 radio because, and I'm talking about the FM kind of stations,
Sure.
just because I do find it repetitive. At the risk of sounding like someone who's ancient, I don't much care for a lot of pop type music. I love rock music. I love good folk artists, singer songwriters, and that's the stuff I've always been drawn to. Growing up in the New York area, once uh, progressive rock radio came into being, we had two great rock radio stations there, WNEW FM and the FM station that ABC owned at the time, which was called WPLJ. And that was kind of named after the Mothers of Invention track, what was it, White Port and Lemon Juice?
I have no
And
idea.
yeah, yeah. And WPLJ. So they had great DJs. They had great music. Clearly, those were the radio stations, especially WNEW, where I first heard Ike and Tina Turner, River Deep, Mountain High, which remains one of my favorite tracks of all time. So yeah,
Sure.
I gravitate towards hearing. Sure, do I like listening to the stuff I grew up with? Absolutely. I have over 400 CDs of that stuff. But
Did you ever invest in the Dick Clark rock and roll era set at all from Time Life?
no, I didn't. Actually, I came across two interesting sets, which are similar but better, in my humble opinion. One of them was put out by what was then called Time Life or Time,
Yeah.
affiliated with Warner Brothers Records, right? They had a whole bunch of CDs that came out, both on cassette and CD, going from the mid 1950s up to and into the late 70s, I think. And so once I heard about those, I started buying them. I didn't buy every single one, but pretty close. So I have those. And then much later, in the 80s, Warner put out something similar, but it was all brand new artists. And it
Okay.
came in a little digipack kind of CD container. And there was a little folded up magazine, believe it or not, that fit inside along. And so it was a collection of 14 different CD samplers with all different artists, every track. And that was like getting a subscription to a magazine in a way. One came every month or every couple of months until Warner decided to scrap the whole thing. And when I first got turned on to it, it was the end of Warner's commitment to that form of music. So and they didn't send them in order. Like I think the first one I got was actually disc number 3, and I got a couple of others, and then it ended. So I wasn't able to get them all, but thanks to the internet, I came to learn there were actually 14 of them. And I tracked down different people who were selling different groups of them or single versions of those CDs. And I now have all 14 of those.
Now I remember, like the first actual greatest hits of Dell that I CD that I ever had was from Rhino Records. You remember Rhino
Sure,
Records?
absolutely. Yeah. Oh, no,
They were
Rhino.
they were great.
Yeah, right. Rhino has done some great stuff. They did a great Roy Orbison greatest hits, and they've done lots of other stuff too.
Oh yeah,
They did,
their box sets were just great. I
yeah,
love owning them.
they did a cool thing several years back here in Westwood near UCLA, where they reopened a store much like their very first store here in Los Angeles. It was just a pop-up store for a limited period of time. And they invited certain artists to come and play live in this little pop-up store. And they had, of course, lots of Rhino merchandise and records there for sale. And the performances were basically free. And it was all done to raise money, I think, for the Music Cares charity, which helps artists who need financial assistance. And so I got to see Richard Thompson in this tiny little pop up store, and there were not more than 50 people in attendance. Similarly, I saw an artist by the name of Emmett Rhodes, who some people are familiar with and recall his first album, which was when it first got airplay, it was mistaken as Paul McCartney's first solo album. That's how close it was to a Beatle-esque sound. It's an
Oh, wow.
amazing album. And so, yeah, you get exposed to a lot of music here, a lot of things that you'd never run into in any other city. And that's one of my favorite things about it.
Oh, that's cool. That is cool. Well, I tell you, Gary, you've been chock full of information. I tell you, I'm glad that we got to do, or at least have a conversation at least, because that it's always nice to talk about music, but when you get to talk about one of your idols, that's also fun.
Yeah, one of the reasons and one of my hopes for this Del Shannon project is that it will expose his music to lots of people who may have only barely heard of him or know only Runaway, if they
Uh-huh.
know that. And I really think, rock biopics, music biopics have become a fairly standard genre. If you haven't seen the Bob Dylan film yet, I highly recommend it.
Oh yeah,
Um,
I'm gonna. Well, I'll probably wait till it comes out on demand, but I definitely plan on.
yeah,
I
if you
definitely
can
want
go
to
to
see
a
it.
theater, if you can go to a theater, really see it
Oh,
in a
okay.
movie theater the way God and show business intended.
Well, I
Uh,
have a home theater in my house, so it's like
yeah, well, still,
But you still
lots of
recommend a
people
theater?
do.
Okay,
I'm
okay,
telling
okay,
you, please,
all right,
please, please see it in a movie theater.
okay,
It's playing right now. But
yep,
anyway, I hope my script um, does a service to people who aren't aware of Dell's music because they should be. Lots of great music, lots of great stories. One of my favorite stories, if you have a little bit more time, I can
yeah.
tell it.
Oh, absolutely.
So when I first spoke, or one of my early conversations with Dell's estate attorney, Neville Johnson, was he told me this great story, and it's in the script. Um, After Dell got clean and sober, he and his wife, Shirley, went on an AA cruise from Los Angeles to Baja California, which is just like one of these 3-day kind of cruises that people take. And this was different, obviously, because there's no booze being served on an AA cruise, as you can imagine.
Sure.
However, there was, interestingly enough, a talent show on this cruise. So, because Dell and Shirley went on as under their real names, well, under his real name, Mr. and Mrs. Charles Westover,
Uh-huh.
no one knew who he was. He was not wearing his hairpiece when he went on the cruise. And so they go on the cruise, they discover there's a talent show. They enter the talent show. And Charles Dell was a big fan of Hank Williams for most of his life. He decides to perform a Hank Williams song for his talent show appearance. And it comes down to 3 finalists. Dell is one of them, or I should say, Charles is one of them. And it turns out that another there's a woman and a guy who are the other 2 in that group of 3, and the other guy actually comes in first, and Dell comes in second, which actually made him thrilled that no one knew who he was. Charles Westover comes in second, gets a little like plastic gold trophy, and as they're leaving the stage, the MC of the talent show calls him over for a private conversation and says, "Have you ever considered doing this professionally?" So
Oh,
that's
Jesus.
it. That's in the script, and that's the story that Neville was kind enough to share with me. And then when I finished the screenplay, Neville was actually the first person I contacted to let him know, to reassure him in a way that I wasn't just a voice on the phone that he had talked to previously. And I told him, he picks up the phone and he barely says hello. And he goes, I told him that I'd finished the script and I wanted him to be the first person to read it. And
Yeah.
he goes, did you put in that story I told you about the AA cruise? And I said, absolutely. And he goes, send me the script. So, so that's in the screenplay, and I think would be a very funny moment, obviously, in the film.
So are we trying to make like a documentary, or are we actually trying to
No,
make an
no,
actual
this is
movie
not
movie?
a documentary. This is for lack of a better phrase, it's a biopic
Okay. And
about Dell.
do you have any idea who you think would play Dell? I mean, like with today's Hollywood.
I don't have any casting suggestions.
Okay.
I'm certainly open to that. Um, we did have a director briefly attached to the project, but it turns out he wasn't, as much as he loved the script, unfortunately, he was not someone who could actually get it off the ground.
Okay.
So we've moved on, and uh, no, it would have to be someone probably in their mid 30s so that they can play him as a younger guy and also play him as an older individual.
Okay. because there's a lot of young talent out there too.
Oh,
You
there's a
know,
lot of
that's
great
just like.
actors who could play
But
him. Yeah,
I'm trying to figure that out too. Like who would be the perfect person because you want them
yeah.
to kind of look like Dell. You know, you kind of want you don't can't just pick
Well,
anybody. You know.
that's kind of the tricky part. It's more important that you get a great actor, whether they are a known, or, for example, or known or unknown. For example, when Gary Busey did the Buddy Holly
Oh
story,
yeah,
most people did not know who Gary Busey was. When Lou Diamond Phillips did
the Bumba.
the Richie Valens story, La
Yeah,
Bamba, most people did not know who Lou Diamond Phillips was.
sure.
Um, Joaquin Phoenix was a more known quantity when he did Walk the Line for the director of the Bob Dylan film, James Mangold. But again, I bet a lot of people did not know who Joaquin Phoenix was. I think he'd been in some indie films, if I remember correctly.
Sure.
So he may not have been known that well to the
And
general public.
now he's known as the Joker or one of the
So to
Jokers
me,
anyway.
yeah, this is before the Joker,
Oh
obviously.
yeah, oh yeah, yeah,
So to me, it's more important to get a terrific actor, and finding someone who looks like Del Shannon would be tricky at best. In real life, Del was about 5 feet 7 inches tall, um, and are you going to find an actor who looks like Dell? Probably not. But are you going to find an actor who can play Dell? That's a much better bet. And
Well, I mean, I could have make a suggestion for you that
you
maybe.
can make any
eh,
suggestions you want. Your viewers and listeners can make any suggestions they
No, no,
want.
no, no, no. But like, if you know somebody that's okay. Now, I don't know how good of an actor he would be because I don't think he has any acting experience. But his grandson Austin Westover, which is
Ah,
Craig's son, looks
okay.
exactly like Dell.
Oh,
I
okay.
mean, I know the guy. I mean, I the kid, and
Okay.
I talk to him sometimes on Facebook, and
Yeah, if
he's
he's
almost a
not an
spitting image.
actor, if he's not an actor, people who are financing the film might balk at whoever it
Well,
is.
yeah, but I mean,
Yeah.
he's the closest that I can think of, that would actually
Yeah.
look like him.
And oh, and another great example is most people didn't know who Austin Butler was before
Oh
he
yeah,
played Elvis, and
sure, yeah.
he did a phenomenal job. Now, Taron Egerton, who played Elton John in Rocket Man, did a great job, but I think they made the incorrect decision to, and he was a singer too, to use Taron's voice. I think he should have really, we all know Elton John's music, right?
Yeah.
Just like
Oh
a
yeah.
lot of us know Dell's music. So
Sure.
I think it's better to have the artist, for the most part, lip sync the original artist's voice or songs than it is to have his voice be present because we know that music backwards and forwards.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
But
And that
if I'll look at Austin, or I may hear from Craig. So we'll
yeah.
see what happens.
Well, I mean, I don't know his acting ability. I just know
Yeah.
that he looks exactly like his grandfather.
Okay.
I mean,
Okay.
it's a
Yeah. Well,
spitting image, pretty much.
when we had, as I mentioned, when we had the table read of the script a while back, none of the actors were necessarily known to the general public, but they did a terrific job in bringing life to my script, and it was great to sit in a conference room with this group of actors and hear your words read aloud.
Oh
So
yeah.
I give kudos to all those people. They know I thank them copiously afterwards. And yeah, we just keep our fingers crossed that this will get off the ground soon.
Yeah, because that would be great because we need something like this. I mean, there are more biopics, more good films that make you that bring a tear to your eye, because there's a lot of crap out there, and see, I'm a movie guy. I'm a physical media collector. I don't
Yep.
mind streaming here and there, but I like to collect because you own when you
Yeah.
collect, you own everything rather than
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
streaming. So
Yeah.
I feel as a
The
film
amazing,
lover, yeah,
I'll say one last thing. The amazing thing isn't how many bad movies may be out there or bad music or bad books or whatever you want to, whatever thing anything in popular culture. That's not amazing. What's amazing is that any good things make it through the process.
Sure, sure. Yeah, that sounds about right. Well, I appreciate you spending some time with me there, Gary. And for anybody that wants to know more about you and about your screenplay, how can they do so?
Well, if it's someone professional, they can contact you certainly. I don't want to give out my personal information
Oh,
here.
no, no, no.
Yeah,
That's fine. I'm just saying,
but
like
they
your
can.
website or whatever, social
Yeah,
media,
the
whatever.
web page is mostly for professional contacts.
Okay,
So if someone out there needs more information, if they can contact you, and you can let me know, that would be
sure.
appreciated.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
yeah, I appreciate the time you gave me today,
Oh, yeah.
and
Well, hey,
look
hey.
forward to more of your shows.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, welcome to the Renegade Radio family. I mean, this was an honor to, I learned more about you, and we learned about Dell, and told me some stuff I didn't know. So that's great. I mean, mission accomplished. So
Excellent.
here's to Dell,
Yep.
and a happy birthday, and have a happy New Year, my
Yes,
friend.
you too, Frankie, and to all your viewers and listeners, have a great 2025.
And we'll see you next week for the season four premiere of Renegade Radio, live next Monday. All right, we'll see you later, Gary. Thank you.
Okay, take care. Bye bye.